Good morning and welcome to 365 Days of Stories with Theo Mayer. Today we are on day 79. Is that right? Yes. And I'm continuing the story of the 12 Iron Sandals. Now remember, the princess, she had made the most wonderful vow to her husband, the king, that she would do anything and everything to endure the situation that he was in, this enchantment where he was unable to be with her at night. And a month before that spell was to be broken, she lost patience with the whole situation. And she ended up taking that lizard skin and throwing it into the fire, which now just made it so that her beloved was under the power of the evil daughter of the evil magician. She'd spent years searching for him, and during this time, the king had, well, we'll find out what state he's in a moment. The princess had sought all over, wearing out every pair of sandals except one. And then finally, when she got to the palace of the king, that last set of sandals had a hole in it. That was even worn out. 11 shafts gone, 11 staffs had been broken. Almost all 12 loaves of iron bread had been eaten. And here she was, now at the palace, necklace having been bartered away for a night in the king's chamber with evil queen. She loved that beautiful necklace which had been given to her by the king, by her beloved, by her husband. She didn't want to part with it, but now it was all she had in order to try to correct this situation that her impatience had created. Well, the queen, the evil queen, she said, "Come with me." And they went up into the palace and through some corridors, and there was a beautiful double door that she opened. And there, lying on the bed, was the king. She closed the door, said, "You have until morning." Night had fallen. When she went over, she couldn't tell whether he was dead or alive. He was covered from head to toe with the little needles that were in his skin. So what she do? She began taking these needles out, starting down with his feet and working her way up toward his head. And as she did, that skin, which had looked red and inflamed, began to look fine. It got back its normal color. It looked healed, and she continued to take these needles out. And as she did, they were so closely packed together that her fingers began to become wounded as she was pulling these needles out. But she saw that as she was pulling them out, the life was returning to him. All through the hours of the night she worked. She had one arm and his face left to pull the needles from when she heard at the door the creak of the lock. And opening up the door, the evil queen came in and said, "Get out! Get out! Your time is up. Go and never come back." Well, as the evil queen said this, the princess, she walked toward the door where the evil queen was standing. And there she held up her wrist. And around her wrist was a bracelet that was like none the evil queen had ever seen before. Again, a gift given to her by her beloved. You can have this for another night with the king. The evil queen looked at it and said, "Don't you have better things to be doing with your time? I will give you great wealth for this, and you will be able to live for the rest of your life. Certainly on the wealth that I will give you for this bracelet. But leave that old sick man alone. You don't need to spend your time with him." But as much as the queen tried to cajole the princess into giving her something besides a night with the king, the princess remained firm. And so, the second night she entered. And she went. Now, I'll tell you, all through that day, they'd been kind of miserable. Her fingers hurt. They were lacerated from pulling those needles out. She couldn't sleep, in part from the pain, but also in part from knowing that she would have a chance again to bring her husband, the king, back into her life. She was ready when the door was opened, ready for what would be in front of her. Her husband, her beloved, full of needles. But it was worse than the night before. She was shocked. The amount of needles in his body seemed to have doubled. She immediately got to work, and you can imagine how painful it must have been to be pulling those needles out with fingers that were already mangled, already damaged. And here she is, her heart winning over the pain in her physical body, which is like she didn't even feel her fingers, and she just pulled needle after needle out of his body. Well, as she did, his breathing seemed to come back and return to normal. She worked more hurriedly than she had before, knowing that it was going to be difficult to get them all out, because she hadn't been able to the night before, and now there were even more. She worked and worked and worked, took these needles out. Hours passed. She could begin to see through the window. That light was creeping in between a small slit in the curtains. She knew her time was almost up. She had gone and gotten all the way through. Both arms were done. She was working her way past the neck, the chin. She was to the upper part of the face that was left. Ears, eyes, forehead. When the creak of the lock in the door came again, and the evil witch came in and began to scream at her to get out. Same as before. The princess this time held up her hand, her left hand, and on that finger was her wedding ring. It's more priceless than the bracelet, more priceless than the necklace, more precious to the princess than either one of those. Again, a deal was wrought. Again, she did not sleep through the day from the pain and the excitement of having one last chance. But the evil queen had told her that no matter what, she was not going to deal with her meddling anymore. She would have one more night with the king, but in the morning, she would be beheaded. The princess had nothing more to lose. She'd lost everything. What else was there? She would die trying to bring her union with the king back. And so she was shoved into the room for a third night and began work on the needles, of which there were more, it seemed, than ever before. But she worked more diligently with her mangled fingers, knowing that this was it. She had to give it everything that she had, and she did. As before, the hours passed. As before, the pile of needles on the floor increased. As before, soon there was light coming in through a crack in the curtains. She had 2 needles left, one in each eyelid. Now, the needles in the eyelids were the worst. They were smaller. And some of the times when she went to grab at the needles, she pushed the needles more deeply into the eyelids, it seemed, than taking them out. But she had 2 left. They were teeny. She pulled one out from one eye, and the eye opened. And then she grabbed a hold of the other needle. Try as she might, she was unable to get it out. The lock in the door creaked. The door was opened. The evil queen came in. Guards were called to seize her and take her away. She held on to that needle. The guards pulled, and as they did, she continued to hold on to the needle, and the needle was plucked out of his eye. His eyes opened. He sat up in bed as if he was completely healthy and normal. He saw and recognized the situation that was taking place and immediately called to his guards, "Guards, seize that lady!" And he pointed to the evil queen. And the guards were happy to do so because they had lived under her tyranny for so long. The guards seized her and took her away. To the dungeon she was taken. The princess and her beloved were reunited. Celebrations could be heard for miles. A new wedding ceremony took place where the young couple now was not so young. And they committed themselves to each other again. Well, as far as I know, they are still living happily today in a kingdom not so very far from here. The evil queen, I'll leave it up to you what they did with her and what happened to her. One never knows. Did they forgive her? Did they send her on her way? Was she to be trusted? Could she perform more evil deeds against them? Was that possible? If one is in a high enough vibration of love, can anything affect that? Or does it cast away all evil? This is a question worth pondering. What is it that we hold inside? And how is it that what is inside of us manifests outside of us? Can we bring our state of consciousness to a place where nothing but good will reach us? Perhaps this is what this tale is about. And the repercussions of not bringing ourselves to that place. Okay. Thanks for joining. Hope you have a great rest of your day.